The article we have this week is Good Enough, The Wicked Use of Testosterone for Defining Femaleness in Women's Sports by James Schultz. Officials have fought over if, where, and when athletes have too much or too little endogenous or natural testosterone, and how to police the use of the testosterone. Questions are most controversial in determining who can compete in women's sports. Affects two populations: women with differences of sex development and trans women.
So a little bit of the background of this article. They defined testosterone as a wicked problem, which they described wicked problems as ill-defined, and they rely on elusive political judgment for resolution. And these sports authorities, athletes, scientists, physicians, etc., they've made testosterone, like I said, out to be a wicked problem by using it to tame the untamable question of who can compete as a woman.
Women's participation in sport threatened the traditional gender order. Initially, they didn't think women should be able to compete in sports. When women began competing internationally in 1920, critics called it profoundly unnatural and thought women would develop wholly masculine physiques and behavior. In the 1960s, concerns mounted, and the International Association of Athletics Federation and the Olympic Committee and other organizations devised strategies to control drug abuse and sex cheats through medical commission. They used multiple versions of sex testing during that time. Nude parade, bare body check swabs, bunch of different things.
Yeah, and they quoted one woman as saying it was the most crude and degrading thing that she had ever been through in her life. So they kind of focused testosterone, like the two main questions that kind of come up here are, should testosterone be used to distinguish between men and women for the purpose of sex segregation in sport, and does elevated testosterone contribute to enhanced sport performance? And as for the first question, the author kind of said that analyzing these hormonal levels had everything to do with controlling and policing who can compete as a woman. And then as for the second question, really, when you think about it, it's not just testosterone that makes an athlete great. There's other factors like biological, psychological, social, political, cultural. So yeah.
In 2011, the IAAF came out with regulations governing eligibility of females with hyperandrogenism to compete in women's competition. Hyperandrogenism is defined as the excessive production of androgenic hormones in women, which is testosterone, excessive as 10 or more nanomoles per liter of functional testosterone. And the policy left women with two choices. They could either drop out of the sport or agree to prescribed medical treatment that would correct their disorder. In July 2015, arbiters ruled that the IAAF had not sufficiently backed the policy with scientific study, and was granted 2 years to produce the evidence or change the policy.
And obviously this policy garnered a lot of disagreement and anger. And so in 2018, well, before that, they did a study, a scientific study with the IAAF scientists, and it was backed by them. And this study, I guess, was a game changer, they said, and many scientists and bioethicists were not happy with the study at all. They thought there was a lot of integrity issues. They thought there was just skewed data and that it was not, it wasn't that great of a study. So in 2018, they used this study and came out with a new policy, which was the eligibility regulations for the female classification athletes with differences of sex development. And the policy kind of hinged on three central elements. The first was the relevant athletes, which they considered legally recognized women whose blood test shows testosterone equal to or greater than the 5 nanomoles, which was actually half of what the previous policy allowed. Next, the restricted events, which included women's international competitions in a 400 meter hurdles, 800 meter, 1500 meter, and mile races. They didn't include the vault, the pole vault, or the hammer throw, which was interesting because those 2 particular events would have the most advantage if there's a higher level of testosterone in someone. And then the eligibility conditions, which stated that athletes must be recognized in law either as female or intersex or equivalent, and they had to reduce their testosterone below the 5 nanomoles for a period of at least 6 months, continuous 6 months, and maintain that reduction in and out of competition for the duration of their career, which is insane to me. And those who didn't meet the conditions could compete in non-restricted and non-international events and could compete in the male classification, or they could compete in any applicable intersex classifications.
Faced with the regulations, Castor Semenea charged that forcing women to suppress their natural testosterone is discriminatory, unnecessary, lacks scientific grounding, and does irreparable harm to affected female athletes. The CAS, the Court of Arbitration for Sports, voted 2-1 in favor of the IAAF. They conceded that the regulations are discriminatory, that such discrimination is necessary, reasonable, and proportionate means of achieving the goal of preserving the integrity of the females' athletics in restricted events. Policies that restrict women's testosterone are sexist, and no one suggests that men who fall within the female range should have to compete in the women's category.
So kind of just wrapping up here, the author kind of pointed out a few last things. For one, if high levels of testosterone in a person is a naturally occurring condition, how can it be unfair? And they pointed out that the types of biological and psychological gifts that sometimes men athletes have, they don't somehow trouble sports administrators in the same way that these advantages or unique traits in females do, which is strange. And they said that this IAAF document was a living document, the policy was, so that means it can and probably will change over time to include all sports. And then in regulating femaleness for the purpose of sport, these policies are telling us who and who doesn't count as far as femaleness goes.
All right, everybody. Good people.